Chapter 1. The shadow beneath the throneth great hall smelled of old wine and older death. Elara pressed herself flat beneath the enormous oak table, her breath shallow, her ribs aching where Marcus had grabbed her. The wood above her head was carved with serpents and roses, beautiful, gothic, wrong. This wasn't a place humans were supposed to enter, but Marcus had chased her here, drunk and furious. And now she was trapped in something far worse than her stepfather's rage. The vampire court had gone silent. She'd stumbled through the iron gates at dusk, desperate, bleeding from a split lip. The castle loomed like a corpse against the purple sky. Blackthorn Keep, ancestral seat of House Valerian, forbidden to mortals by ancient law. But Marcus had been screaming her name, his belt in his hand, and she'd run without thinking. Now she crouched beneath the high table where the vampire king himself was supposed to sit, stupid, so stupid. Footsteps echoed through the hall, slow, deliberate, not Marcus's stumbling gait. "My Lord Caelan," a woman's voice purred. "A mortal has entered your hall uninvited. Shall I remove her?" Silence stretched like drawn wire. Elara's heart hammered. She could see boots, now black leather, perfectly still, standing 3 feet from where she hid. Above her, the table creaked as someone sat down. "Remove her," a man said quietly. His voice was winter, frost and smoke. "Gently, gently?" The woman sounded amused. "She's violated sanctuary law. The penalty, I know the penalty, Isolde." Another pause. Elara's fingernails dug into the stone floor. Through the gap beneath the tablecloth, she saw more figures gathering, pale faces, crimson eyes, elegant predators circling. "She's bleeding," someone murmured. Fresh, human, quiet. The command wasn't loud, but the hall obeyed instantly. Elara's breathing hitched. She'd heard stories about House Valerian, the oldest bloodline, the most powerful, ruled by a king who'd been ancient when Rome fell. They said he didn't feed on humans anymore. They said he enforced strict consent laws among his house, that he punished vampires who hunted without permission. They also said he was merciless. The tablecloth lifted. Elara flinched back, hitting her head on the table leg. She found herself staring up into a face that stole her breath, pale as moonlight, sharp as broken glass, beautiful in the way winter is beautiful. His eyes were silver blue, not red. His dark hair fell forward as he crouched, studying her with the unblinking focus of something that had forgotten how to be human. "You're bleeding," he observed. Elara's hand flew to her mouth. Her fingers came away red. "My stepfather," she whispered. I didn't know where else to, so you fled into a vampire stronghold." His tone was flat, unreadable. "Clever. I'm sorry. I'll leave." "Please don't, you cannot leave." Her stomach dropped. He straightened, the tablecloth falling back into place, and she heard him address the gathered court. "She claimed sanctuary under the old laws that grants her 3 nights protection." Murmurs of protest rippled through the hall. "My lord, she's mortal. She crossed the threshold of her own will, fleeing harm. The law is clear." His voice hardened. "Or shall I remind you what happens to those who violate sanctuary in my hall?" The protest died instantly. 3 nights, he repeated. "She will be housed, fed, and left untouched. After that she chooses, leave freely, or petition for longer protection. Are we understood?" A chorus of reluctant assent. Elara heard him move away, then stop. "Isolde, show her to the east tower. Post a guard, one who values his life, as you command, Lord Caelan." The tablecloth lifted again. This time, woman's face appeared beautiful, cold, with crimson eyes that held open contempt. "Come, mortal, quickly, before he changes his mind." Elara crawled out, her legs shaking. The hall was vast, lit by hundreds of candles that cast writhing shadows on stone walls. At least 24 vampires watched her, some curious, some hungry, all impossibly still. To the high table, the vampire king stood with his back to her, staring into a fireplace where blue flames burned without heat. He didn't turn. Isolde's fingers closed around Elara's wrist, cold, iron strong, and pulled her toward a spiral staircase. "You should have stayed with your stepfather," Isolde said softly as they climbed. 3 nights isn't long, and when they're over, you'll have nowhere to go but back. He'll kill me, perhaps, but at least you'd die quickly." Isolde's smile was sharp. "In here, there are fates worse than death for a mortal girl." They reached a small chamber, stone walls, narrow bed, single window overlooking darkness. Isolde pushed her inside and locked the door from the outside. Elara pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching the night. Below, she could see the castle gates. Beyond them, the village lights flickered. Marcus was out there somewhere, drunk, furious, waiting. But in here she turned, studying the room. No mirror, no silver. A single candle burned on the windowsill, its flame steady and wrong, like the blue fire downstairs. 3 nights. She touched her split lip carefully. The bleeding had stopped, but the ache remained, physical proof that her old life had followed her here. Somewhere below, a bell tolled midnight. Elara sank onto the narrow bed, exhaustion crashing over her. She'd escaped Marcus. She'd claimed sanctuary in a vampire stronghold. She'd looked into the eyes of an immortal king and lived. Now she just had to survive 3 nights in a place where she was the only living thing for miles.As. Her eyes drifted closed. She remembered the way Lord Caelan had studied her beneath the table, not with hunger, but with something stranger, something almost like recognition. 3 nights, she thought. Then I'll figure out what comes next, if she lived that long. Chapter 2. The rules of the night. Elara woke to absolute darkness. For a moment, panic seized her, the kind that came from years of waking to Marcus's heavy footsteps, to doors slamming, to her mother's apologetic silence. Then memory returned. The castle, the vampires, the silver-eyed king who'd granted her 3 nights. She sat up slowly, heart racing. The candle had burned out. No moonlight came through the window, just thick, velvet darkness that pressed against her eyes. A soft sound came from the corner of the room. You sleep restlessly, a voice observed. Elara scrambled back against the headboard, dragging the thin blanket up like a shield. Who peace? The voice was male, cultured, faintly amused. I'm not here to harm you. A flame sparked in the darkness, a candle lighting itself. In its glow, she saw a figure sitting in a chair she hadn't noticed before. Not Lord Caelan. This vampire was younger looking, with auburn hair and eyes that shifted between amber and red. My name is Dorian, he said pleasantly. Lord Caelan assigned me to ensure your safety. By watching me sleep? By standing guard outside your door. But you were having nightmares. He tilted his head. You called out twice. A man's name, Marcus? Elara's throat tightened. My stepfather. Something flickered across Dorian's face, not quite sympathy, but close. Well, he cannot reach you here. House Valerian hasn't lost a guest to mortal violence in 3 centuries. What about immortal violence? Dorian's smile was sharp. That's why I'm here. Though I should mention you're safer than you think. Lord Caelan doesn't grant sanctuary lightly, and once granted, he enforces it absolutely. He paused. Even against himself? What does that mean? It means no one in this house will touch you without your consent. Not for feeding. Not for sport. Not even if you beg them to end it. His amber eyes held hers. Those are his rules. Break them, and you'll wish you'd never been born. A chill ran down her spine. Has anyone broken them? Once, 60 years ago. A young vampire from House Corvus thought himself above mortal laws. Dorian's expression went cold. Lord Caelan executed him personally, in front of the entire court. It took 3 nights for him to die. Elara pulled the blanket tighter. You're telling me this to make me feel safe? I'm telling you this so you understand what you've walked into. This isn't a fairy tale. Lord Caelan isn't some romantic hero who'll fall at your feet. Dorian stood, moving with that unnatural vampire grace. But he is honorable, by our standards. You claim sanctuary. He will honor it. And after 3 nights? After 3 nights, you choose. Leave or petition to stay longer. He moved toward the door, then paused. If you petition, you'll have to offer something in return. We don't shelter mortals out of charity. Offer what? But Dorian was already gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Elara sat in the candlelight, her mind racing. 3 nights. Then what? Return to Marcus? She'd rather die. But staying here meant bargaining with vampires, creatures who measured time in centuries and saw humans as cattle. She forced herself to stand, moving to the window. Dawn was breaking, pale gray light creeping across a landscape of dead gardens and broken fountains. The castle looked even more desolate by daylight, like something from a Gothic painting. A soft knock startled her. Come in, she said wearily. The door opened to reveal a girl, human, maybe 17, carrying a tray of food. She had dark circles under her eyes and moved with the careful quietness of someone who'd learned not to draw attention. Breakfast, the girl murmured, setting the tray down. Bread, cheese, water. Simple but fresh. You're human, Elara said, surprised. Yes, miss. I'm Vera. I serve House Valerian. She kept her eyes down. Lord Caelan said you're to be treated as a guest. If you need anything, wait. Elara caught her arm gently. You serve them? Willingly? Vera's expression shuddered. It's complicated, miss. Do they feed on you? A pause. Only with permission. And never enough to harm. Vera's voice dropped to a whisper. It's better here than out there. At least Lord Caelan keeps his word. Before Elara could respond, Vera pulled free and hurried out. Elara ate slowly, thinking. House Valerian kept human servants. Enforced consent laws. Punished vampires who broke the rules. It didn't match the horror stories she'd heard about vampire courts, places of blood orgies and casual murder, but it also wasn't safety. Just a different kind of cage. She was washing her face in a basin of cold water when the door opened again. No knock this time. Lord Caelan stood in the doorway. By daylight, he looked even more inhuman. His skin held a faint luminescence, like pearl. His silver blue eyes seemed to see through her. He wore dark, old-fashioned clothing, a tailored coat and high collar that belonged to another century. You slept poorly, he observed. It wasn't a question. Elara wondered how he knew vampire hearing. Probably. They could likely hear every breath, every racing heartbeat in this entire castle. Bad dreams, she said carefully. About your stepfather. She stiffened. Dorian told you? Dorian reports to me. As does everyone in this house. He stepped inside, and the temperature seemed to drop. I need to understand what you fled, miss. Elara, just Elara, Elara. He spoke her name like he was tasting it. Your stepfather. Is he violent? She touched her split lip without thinking. Yes. Will he come looking for you? I don't know, maybe. Her voice cracked. He drinks. When he drinks, she stopped, shame burning her throat. Lord Caelan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You're safe here. For 3 nights? Certainly. But you should know if he approaches the gates, my people will not intervene. Sanctuary protects you within these walls, not outside them. I understand. Do you? He moved closer, studying her with that unnerving intensity. You walked into a vampire stronghold to escape one monster. Some would call that prejudgment. Some would call it survival. A ghost of something. Approval crossed his face. Perhaps. He turned toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. You will not wander the castle alone. If you need something, summon Dorian or Vera. There are places here that are not safe for mortals, even with sanctuary. Sanctuary protects you from us. It doesn't protect you from the castle itself. His gaze held hers. Blackthorn Keep is old, Elara, older than memory. It has its own hungers. Before she could ask what that meant, he was gone. Elara sank back onto the bed, exhausted, though she'd just woken. She was trapped between 2 worlds now, one ruled by a man who'd beaten her, another ruled by creatures who drank blood. 3 nights to decide which death she preferred, or whether she could find a third option. Neither world expected. Chapter 3. Shadows and Secrets. The second night. Elara had learned the castle's rhythms. The vampires slept during the day, true death sleep. Vera called it, when even ancient ones couldn't wake if the castle burned around them. That was when the human servants moved freely, cleaning halls that never seemed to get dirty, tending gardens that never bloomed. Elara spent those daylight hours exploring the spaces Dorian had deemed safe, the library, the conservatory, the East Wing corridors. But she felt the weight of forbidden doors, heard strange sounds echoing from the lower levels. The castle breathed around her, old stone settling, wind sighing through passages that shouldn't exist. Now dusk was falling, and the dead were waking. She stood in the library, 3 stories of books bound in leather and languages she couldn't read when she heard footsteps behind her. Not Dorian's measured stride or Vera's quiet shuffle. These were heavier, deliberately loud. The little mortal reads. Elara turned to find a vampire she hadn't seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and crimson eyes that held open contempt. He wore modern clothing, unlike Lord Caelan's antique formality, and carried himself with aggressive confidence. I'm sorry, she said carefully. Am I not allowed? You're allowed wherever Lord Caelan permits. He moved closer, circling her like a predator. I'm Matthias, second of House Valerian, and I think granting you sanctuary was a mistake. Her pulse kicked up. Lord Caelan disagrees. Lord Caelan is sentimental about mortals. It's his greatest weakness. Matthias picked up a book from the table beside her, some ancient tome, and let it drop with a heavy thud. Do you know what you smell like to us? Fresh bread. Warm copper. Life. His voice dropped. It's intoxicating. Then perhaps you should leave. Perhaps you should. He leaned against the bookshelf, blocking her exit. 3 nights. That's all you have. Then, what? You'll petition to stay? Offer your vein like the other little servants? I haven't decided. Let me help you decide. Matthias's smile showed too many teeth. Mortals who stay here survive in 3 ways. Servants like Vera who give blood weekly and grow pale as ghosts. Donors who give blood nightly until their hearts give out. Or companions, pretty things kept for conversation and occasional feeding until we tire of them. Elara's hands clenched. Lord Caelan said you'd be protected. And you are. I won't touch you. His crimson eyes glittered. But protection expires. And when it does, you'll learn what it means to be mortal in a house of immortals. That's enough, Matthias. The voice came from the doorway, cold as winter ice. Lord Caelan stood there, still as a statue, his silver blue eyes fixed on his second in command. Matthias straightened immediately. My lord, I was merely terrifying our guest. Yes, I heard. Caelan moved into the library with that liquid grace they all shared. You'll apologize. Now. A muscle worked in Matthias's jaw. For a moment, Elara thought he might refuse. Then he turned to her stiffly. My apologies, Miss Elara. I spoke out of turn. Dismissed, Caelan said quietly. Matthias left, but not before casting a look at Elara that promised this wasn't over. Silence settled over the library. Caelan moved to the window, gazing out at the darkening grounds. You should know, he said, without turning. Matthias speaks for many in my house. They believe sheltering mortals makes us weak. And you? Elara's voice was steadier than she felt. What do you believe? I believe strength and cruelty are not synonymous. He glanced back at her. Though I seem to be in the minority, she studied him, this ancient creature who enforced laws about consent, who'd executed his own kind for harming mortals. Why? Did you really grant me sanctuary? Dorian said. You don't do it lightly. I don't. He turned fully now, and in the candlelight his face was all sharp angles and shadow. Do you know what you did? Running through those gates? Something stupid. A ghost of a smile. Something desperate. There's a difference. He moved closer, and she fought the urge to step back. Sanctuary is an old law, older than House Valerian, older than the vampire courts themselves. It comes from a time when mortals and immortals lived differently, more intertwined. What changed? Fear, on both sides. His gaze held hers. But the law remains. When a mortal flees harm and crosses our threshold willingly, we must offer protection. To refuse is to lose our humanity entirely. You're not human, no? But once, a very long time ago, I was. Something flickered across his face, grief, maybe, or memory. I try to remember that. Elara's breath caught. She'd never heard a vampire speak of their mortal life. They were supposed to be monsters who'd abandon humanity gladly, who saw their former lives as weakness. How long ago? She whispered. Long enough that your language didn't exist. Long enough that your gods are dead. He said it without emotion, like reciting facts. I've watched empires rise and fall, Elara. I've seen plagues wipe out millions. I've forgotten more lives than you will ever know. Then why do you care about one mortal girl? The question hung between them. Caelan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I still remember the night I ran. The night I fled something that terrified me and found myself at the mercy of creatures I didn't understand. His voice was soft, almost fragile. Someone showed me mercy then. I try to honor that memory. Elara's throat tightened. What were you running from? That's a story for another night. He moved toward the door, then paused. Matthias was correct about one thing: you need to decide what happens after your 3 nights end. If you petition to stay, I will require something in return. Service, blood, or something else. Think carefully. And if I leave, then I will ensure you reach safety. But safety is relative. Your stepfather, I know. She wrapped her arms around herself. I can't go back there. Then you're choosing to stay. I'm choosing not to die. She met his eyes. There's a difference. This time his smile was real, brief, but genuine. Yes, there is. He left her alone in the library, surrounded by books written by the dead for the dead. Elara sank into a chair, her mind spinning. She had 1 night left before her sanctuary expired. 1 night to decide between Marcus's fists and a vampire's bargain. Neither felt like freedom, but perhaps, she thought, freedom wasn't the point anymore. Perhaps survival was enough. Outside, the moon rose full and cold and watching. In the distance, she heard something howl. Not a wolf, something older. The castle settled around her, and Elara realized she wasn't afraid. She was calculating. Chapter 4. Blood and Boundary. As the third night arrived with unseasonable cold, Elara woke to frost on her window and Vera standing beside her bed, face pale with worry. "Miss, you need to come. Now." "What's wrong?" "Lord Caelan requests your presence in the hall." It's Vera's hands twisted in her apron. "It's about your stepfather." Elara's stomach dropped. She dressed quickly, following Vera through corridors that seemed darker than usual, candles guttering as they passed. The castle felt tense, expectant, like something holding its breath. The great hall was filled with vampires, dozens of them, more than she'd seen before. They lined the walls, beautiful and terrible, their eyes tracking her as she entered. At the high table, Lord Caelan stood with Dorian and Matthias flanking him. His expression was unreadable. At the center of the hall, held between two vampire guards, was Marcus. Her stepfather looked smaller than she remembered, drunk, disheveled, reeking of whiskey even from across the room. His eye was blackened, his shirt torn. When he saw her, his face twisted with rage. "There you are, you ungrateful little bitch," one of the guards struck him casually. Marcus crumpled, gasping. "That's enough," Caelan said quietly. He looked at Elara. "He came to the gates an hour ago, demanding we return his property. He was persistent." Elara's hands were shaking. "What will you do with him?" "That depends on you." She blinked. "Me?" Caelan descended from the dais, moving with that predatory grace. "Your sanctuary ends at dawn. Technically, you're still under my protection. But this man is your family. By mortal law, he has certain rights." "He has no rights," she said, voice cracking. "He's beaten me since I was 12. Since my mother married him and stopped seeing who he really was." Marcus spat blood. "Lying little whore. I fed you, sheltered you, you terrorized me." Elara took a step forward, surprised by her own courage. "Every night, wondering if you'd come home drunk. Every day, walking on eggshells. My mother died 6 months ago, and you blamed me. Said I should have saved her from the cancer." Tears burned her eyes. "You said I owed you." Silence filled the hall. Even the vampires seemed to be listening with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Caelan's voice was soft. "What would you have me do, Elara?" She looked at Marcus, this man who'd made her life a nightmare, who'd driven her into the arms of monsters. Part of her wanted him dead, wanted to watch these beautiful predators tear him apart. But another part, the part that was still human, still her, recoiled from that darkness. "Let him go," she whispered. Matthias made a sound of disgust. "My lord, this is let him go," Elara repeated, stronger now. "But make him understand. If he comes back, if he ever tries to find me again." She met Caelan's silver blue eyes. "Then you do what you think is right." Something flickered across Caelan's face, approval, perhaps, or respect. He turned to Marcus. "You heard her. You will leave these lands tonight. You will not return. You will not speak her name. You will forget she ever existed." His voice dropped to something ancient and terrible. "Because if you don't, I will personally ensure your death lasts 3 nights. Do we understand each other?" Marcus's face had gone gray. Whatever he saw in Caelan's eyes broke something in him. He nodded frantically. "Good." Caelan gestured, and the guards dragged Marcus toward the door. "See him to the village border. If he turns back, kill him." As Marcus was hauled away, still whimpering, Elara felt something loosen in her chest. Not freedom, not yet, but the first breath after drowning. The hall emptied slowly, vampires drifting away to their hunts and intrigues. Soon only Caelan, Dorian, and Elara remained. "That was merciful," Dorian observed. "Some would call it weak. Some would be wrong," Caelan said. He looked at Elara. "You could have asked me to kill him. Many would have. I know." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But that would make me like him. Someone who uses power to hurt people weaker than themselves. We are not people, Elara, aren't you?" She met his gaze. "You have laws, ethics. You punish those who break them. That's more than Marcus ever had." Caelan was quiet for a long moment. Then, almost gently, "Your sanctuary ends at dawn. You have perhaps 4 hours to decide. Will you petition to stay, or will I arrange safe passage to another city?" The moment she'd been dreading had arrived. Elara took a breath. "If I stay, what would you require?" "That depends on what you're willing to give." He moved to the fireplace, those blue flames casting strange shadows on his face. Vera gives blood once weekly. It sustains one vampire for 7 days, no harm to her, and she receives shelter, food, protection. Some mortals find that trait acceptable. And if I wanted more than just survival? His eyes sharpened. Meaning? I can read, write, do mathematics. She'd been thinking about this since Matthias's threats, since she'd realized she had nothing to bargain with except her mind. Your library is massive, but I saw books damaged by time, records disorganized. If I stayed, I could help maintain them, catalog them, make them useful again. Dorian made an interested sound. A librarian mortal. That's novel. It's more than blood, Caelan said slowly. You'd be offering intellectual service. Yes, and in return I want, she steadied herself, protection. A real room, not just a cell. And I want the same rules you have: consent-based feeding. No vampire touches me without permission, ever. Matthias would hate this. The other vampires would see it as her rising above her station. But Elara was tired of being powerless. Caelan studied her for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, 1 year, you'll maintain the library, catalog our records, and give blood twice monthly, no more. In return, you have full protection of House Valerian, your own quarters, and absolute consent rights. After 1 year, we renegotiate. Agreed. The word left her before she could second-guess it. Then at dawn, when your sanctuary ends, you'll become a member of this household. Caelan extended his hand, pale, cold, steady. Welcome to Blackthorn Keep, Elara. She took his hand. His skin was ice against her warmth, but his grip was careful, almost gentle. One more thing, he said softly. The library's lower levels are forbidden. There are texts there that would destroy a mortal mind. Promise me you'll heed that warning. I promise. He released her hand, but she felt the cold of his touch long after.As she left the hall. Elara realized she'd just traded one cage for another. But this cage had books, rules, and a vampire king who remembered what it meant to flee. Maybe that was enough. Outside, dawn approached, gray and cold and inevitable. Her old life was ending. Something new, strange, and dangerous was beginning. Chapter 5. The weight of eternity. 3 weeks into her new life, Elara discovered that vampires were terrible at organizing anything. The library's main floor was manageable leather-bound classics, philosophical treatises, histories written by mortals who'd never known the truth about the creatures living among them. But the second floor was chaos. Books in dead languages mixed with modern novels. Maps from vanished empires crumbling beside fresh journals. Everything coated in dust that seemed to regenerate overnight. This is going to take years, she muttered, pulling down a tome written in what looked like ancient Greek. Centuries. Actually, a voice said behind her. She turned to find Lord Caelan standing in the doorway, looking almost amused. He visited the library often, usually in the deep hours of night when the rest of the house was hunting. At first, she'd thought he was checking on her. Now she suspected he simply liked the silence. I've been keeping these books for a very long time, he continued, moving into the room. Organization seemed pointless. What does order matter when you have eternity to find what you need? It matters when you forget where you put something. Elara set the Greek tome aside, making a note in her ledger. I found a first edition Dante last week. Behind gardening manuals. From the 18th century. Yes, I remember putting that there. Why? I was angry at Dante that decade. Putting him with the gardening books felt appropriately petty. He said it with such casual absurdity that Elara laughed before she could stop herself. The sound seemed to surprise him. His expression softened into something almost warm. You laugh easily for someone living among predators. I've been here 3 weeks and no one's killed me yet. I'm taking that as a good sign. She climbed down from the ladder, brushing dust from her dress, a simple dark thing Vera had found for her. Besides, Dorian says the worst that happens to librarians is paper cuts. Dorian is an optimist. Dorian is terrifying. That too. Caelan moved to the window, gazing out at grounds silvered by moonlight. You've adapted well. Better than most mortals would. Elara joined him, maintaining a careful distance. She'd learned that vampires valued personal space. Getting too close triggered predatory instincts, made their eyes shift toward red. I've had practice adapting. You don't survive someone like Marcus without learning to read rooms, anticipate moods. That's a survival skill. Not the same as comfort. Are you asking if I'm comfortable? He glanced at her, those silver blue eyes reflecting candlelight. I'm asking if you regret your choice. She considered that. The honest answer was complicated. I miss sunlight, she admitted. I miss not being afraid. When Matthias looks at me, I still see hunger. When Isolde passes me in the halls, she smiles like she's imagining what I'd taste like, and yet you stay, because here, the monsters follow rules. She met his gaze. Out there, they don't. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted. Elara had noticed this about Caelan. He didn't fill silence with empty words. He let it exist, let meanings instead hang in the air like smoke. You've been feeding from Vera, she said carefully. I've seen her leaving your chambers. Twice this week. His expression didn't change. Yes, with her full consent, as always. I agreed to twice monthly. The words came out before she could stop them. If you need more than Vera can provide, no. The sharpness of his response startled her. He turned away from the window, putting distance between them. Vera is accustomed to the feeding. Her blood knows my venom, responds to it. Yours would be. He stopped. It would be different. Different how? New blood always tastes of the mortal's life. Their fears, their joys, their sorrows. His voice dropped. I've lived long enough to know I don't want to taste yours. Not yet. Something in those words made her chest tighten. Because I've had a hard life. Because you've had a hard life, and I would feel it. Every blow your stepfather landed. Every night you cried yourself to sleep. Every moment you learned to make yourself small, to survive. He looked at her then, and for the first time she saw something raw in his ancient eyes. I've tasted enough human suffering, Elara. I don't need to taste yours. She didn't know what to say to that. This creature who'd lived centuries, who'd watched empires fall, he was trying to protect her from his own hunger. Or perhaps protecting himself from her pain. The first feeding is in today's, she said quietly. We agreed on it. I can negotiate with Vera for additional. No, now it was her turn to be sharp. We made an agreement. I intend to honor it. She took a breath. Unless you're saying you can't control yourself around my blood? His eyes flashed. I have perfect control. Then prove it. The challenge hung between them. Caelan stared at her like she'd just done something incomprehensible, which perhaps she had. Mortals didn't challenge vampire lords. They certainly didn't question their control. But Elara was tired of being treated like fragile glass. 2 days, Caelan finally said. We'll do the first feeding here, in the library. Dorian will be present as witness. It's protocol for first feedings, to ensure consent is clear and boundaries are respected. Fine, and Elara. He moved toward the door, then paused. If at any point you want to stop before, during, after, you simply say so. No consequences. No judgment. Understood? Understood. After he left, Elara sank into a chair, her hands trembling. What had she just agreed to? Letting a vampire feed from her, taste her blood, her life, her memories. Vera had made it sound clinical, a brief bite, some lightheadedness, then bandages and rest. But Vera hadn't heard the way Caelan spoke about blood, about tasting human suffering. Elara looked at her wrist, pale in the candlelight. In 2 days, she would learn what it meant to give part of herself to a creature who'd forgotten how to be human. The library suddenly felt very cold. Outside, something howled in the distance, that same not wolf sound she'd heard her first night. She wondered what other creatures lurked in Blackthorn Keep's shadows, what other bargains had been struck in these ancient halls. Her ledger lay open on the desk, half filled with book titles and locations. Such careful organization, such human order imposed on immortal chaos. Elara picked up her pen and kept writing, because if she stopped, if she let herself think too hard about what was coming, she might run. And there was nowhere left to run to. Chapter 6. The first binding night of the feeding arrived with a storm. Elara stood in the library, watching rain lash the windows while thunder rolled across the valley. She'd chosen this room deliberately, filled with her work, her purpose, surrounded by the familiar scent of old paper and leather. If she was going to let a vampire drink from her, it would be on ground she'd claimed as her own. You're nervous. She turned to find Dorian in the doorway, elegant as always in dark velvet. His amber eyes held something like sympathy. Is it that obvious? Your heartbeat echoes through the entire East Wing. He moved into the room carrying a leather case. But nervousness is normal, expected even. The first feeding is always the most intense. Because the vampire tastes your life? Because you're crossing a threshold. After tonight, you'll be blood bonded to Lord Caelan. Nothing permanent, he added quickly. seeing her expression. Not like the old bonds that enslaved mortals, but there will be a connection. You'll sense his hunger, his moods. He'll sense your fear, your pain. Elara's stomach churned. No one mentioned that. No one wanted to frighten you more than necessary. Dorian set the case on a table, opening it to reveal bandages, antiseptic, and a small silver knife. The bond fades if feedings stop, but while active, it serves a purpose. It helps the vampire control themselves, feel what the mortal feels. Makes it harder to take too much. How comforting. It's actually quite brilliant. A safety measure built into our biology. He glanced toward the door. He's coming. Are you ready? No, yes. Caelan entered. Like winter itself, cold, silent, inevitable. He wore simple dark clothing, his hair tied back, his silver blue eyes fixed on Elara with an intensity that made breathing difficult. Dorian bowed slightly and moved to the corner. Witness and guardian both. You can still refuse, Caelan said quietly. Say the word and we'll negotiate different terms. Elara lifted her chin. I don't go back on my word. Neither do I. He moved closer, and she caught the scent of him, rain and old stone and something indefinably other. Give me your wrist. She extended her arm, fighting to keep it steady. Caelan took her wrist gently, his cold fingers against her pulse point. For a moment he just stood there, feeling her heartbeat, her warmth, her life. I need to tell you what will happen, he said softly. My venom will numb the pain, but you'll feel pressure, euphoria. Possibly it affects mortals differently. Some experience pleasure, others just detachment. You may see memories, mine or yours. I don't know which. It lasts perhaps a minute. And you'll taste my life, yes. His thumb traced the blue vein at her wrist. I'll taste your fear, your grief, your strength, everything that makes you who you are. His eyes met hers. I'm sorry for that. Don't be. She was surprised by her own steadiness. If you're going to take from me, you should know what you're taking. Something flickered across his face, surprise, or respect, or something deeper. He lowered his head to her wrist, his breath cool against her skin. Look at me, he murmured. Not away, at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes as his fangs, delicate, precise, pierced her skin. The first sensation was cold, then heat, then a rush of something that blanked out thought entirely. She saw a boy running through wheat fields, laughing, golden sun on his face. The same face, older now, watching a girl with dark hair, love and terror mixing, blood on his hands, not his own. A woman's scream, darkness, waking to hunger so vast it consumed everything. Centuries of night, faces blurring together, learning control through agony, building rules to cage the monster, standing in this very library, alone, always alone than her own memories. Marcus's fist, her mother's funeral, running through the gates, Caelan's silver blue eyes beneath the table, finding purpose in dusty books. Beginning to feel safe, the visions shattered. Elara gasped, finding herself leaning against Caelan, his arms supporting her weight. He'd already withdrawn, his mouth stained red. Dorian was there immediately, pressing a bandage to her wrist. Breathe, Dorian instructed. Slow breaths. The euphoria will fade. But it wasn't euphoria she felt. It was connection, a thin thread linking her to the vampire who'd just tasted her soul. She could sense him, cold and vast and ancient, holding himself rigid with control. I saw you, she whispered. Before, when you were human. Caelan's expression closed. That's unusual. Most mortals only see recent memories. You were happy once. In the wheat fields. That was a very long time ago. What happened? The woman who were not discussing that. His voice had gone sharp, distant. He looked at Dorian. She's stable? Pulse is strong. No excessive blood loss. Dorian helped Elara into a chair. The bond formed correctly. I can feel it from here, you're linked. Elara touched the bandage. At her wrist, still feeling the ghost of Caelan's mouth, his venom, his grief. You've been alone a long time, she said quietly. I felt it. Centuries of being alone. Elara, is that why you enforce the consent laws? Why you remember mercy? She looked up at him. Because you remember what it was like to be powerless. Silence crashed through the library. Caelan stared at her like she'd struck him. Dorian had gone very still. You should rest, Caelan finally said. The first feeding is exhausting. Vera will bring you food, iron supplements. You'll feel weak for a day or two. I felt your memories. That was not an invitation to psychoanalyze me. His voice had turned to ice. The feeding is done. The bond is formed. That's all you need to know. He left before she could respond, moving with that inhuman speed. Dorian sighed. You touched a nerve, he said, packing away the medical supplies. Ancient vampires don't like being reminded of their humanity. It's uncomfortable for them. He showed me those memories. He didn't show you anything. Blood memory flows both ways during first feedings. It's involuntary. Dorian helped her stand. But perhaps it's good you saw. Caelan has been lord of this house for 6 centuries. People forget he was once just a terrified boy who made the wrong choice. What choice? That's his story to tell, if he ever does. Dorian guided her toward the door. Rest now. And Elara, what you saw tonight, keep it to yourself. The other vampires can't know their lord was once weak. It would invite challenge. After he left her at her chamber door, Elara collapsed onto her bed. Her wrist throbbed beneath the bandage. The bond hummed in her chest, a cold, distant presence that was unmistakably Caelan. She'd given him her blood, and in return received glimpses of his lost humanity. The trade felt uneven, but as she drifted toward sleep, she realized something. For the first time since arriving at Blackthorn Keep, Caelan felt less like a monster and more like someone who'd survived the unthinkable. Just like her, outside, the storm raged on, and the bond between them pulsed like a second heartbeat. Chapter 7. When shadows strike far days after the feeding. The world caught fire. Elara was cataloging manuscripts in the library's second floor when she felt a spike of alarm through the bond, sharp enough to make her gasp. Caelan's presence, usually distant and controlled, suddenly blazed with warning. The window exploded inward. Glass and wood showered across the floor as 3 figures crashed through vampires, moving with deadly purpose. Elara barely had time to scream before one was on her, cold hand clamping over her mouth. The mortal librarian, a woman's voice purred. Red eyes, pale skin painted with dark symbols. House Corvus sends its regards. Elara bit down hard. The vampire hissed, jerking back, and Dorian was there, materializing from shadows, his hand closing around the woman's throat. Intruders, he snarled. In our house, during peacetime. Peace is over, another vampire said, circling. Male, built like a soldier, wearing leather armor marked with a raven sigil. House Corvus has grown tired of Valerian's mortal sympathies. Your lord's weakness ends tonight. The third vampire lunged for Elara. She dove behind a bookshelf as ancient tomes crashed around her. Through the bond, she felt Caelan's fury ice cold and absolute, and then he was there. Moving faster than her eyes could track, he caught the attacking vampire mid-leap, slamming him into the wall hard enough to crack stone. You dare. Caelan's voice was winter itself. You dare breach my home? We dare everything. The female vampire broke free from Dorian, laughing. House Corvus challenges your rule, Lord Caelan. Your protection of mortals has made you weak. Made all of Valerian weak. We claim she never finished. Caelan moved, and suddenly her head was in his hands, twisted at an impossible angle. She crumpled, truly dead. The armored vampire's expression flickered. You'll start a war. Your lord started it when he sent assassins into my house. Caelan dropped the body without ceremony. Tell Damian Corvus that if he wants war, he can come himself instead of sending children to die. More glass shattered below the main hall. Shouts echoed through the castle. Elara's heart hammered as she realized this wasn't just an attack on her. It was an assault on the entire house. Dorian, secure the east wing, Caelan ordered. Get Vera and the other mortals to the sanctuary rooms. No one feeds tonight. We can't afford the vulnerability. My lord, now. Dorian vanished. The 2 remaining Corvus vampires exchanged glances, then retreated through the broken window with inhuman speed. Caelan let them go, turning to Elara. Are you hurt? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Through the bond, she felt his assessment quick, clinical, checking for injuries she might not feel yet. Blood on her hands from the glass, but nothing serious. The sanctuary, he said. Underground. Blessed chambers where vampires can't enter easily. You'll be safe there. What about you? I'm ending this. His eyes had gone fully silver, ancient, inhuman, terrifying. House Corvus wants to test my strength? They're about to learn why I've ruled for 6 centuries. He moved toward the door, but Elara caught his arm. Cold, like touching ice. Wait, why attack now? Why tonight? Because they've been watching. They know I fed from you for days ago. They think the bond makes me vulnerable, distracted. His jaw clenched. They're not entirely wrong. The bond means I'll feel it if you're hurt. Means part of my attention will always be on protecting you. He pulled free, gentler than she expected. which is why you need to hide, now. But before she could move, Matthias appeared in the doorway, clothes torn, blood on his face. My lord, they've breached the main hall. At least 20 Corvus vampires. Damien himself is here. Caelan's expression turned deadly. Is that so? He's demanding you surrender the mortal. Says House Corvus will end the attack if you hand over the pet who's made you weak. Matthias's crimson eyes found Elara. Some of our house agrees with him. The words hit like a physical blow. Elara felt Caelan's fury spike through the bond, not at the attack, but at the betrayal. Which of our house? His voice was dangerously quiet. Isolde, Marcus, 3 of the younger vampires. Matthias looked almost apologetic. They believe keeping mortals here invites weakness. They want traditional ways restored. Traditional ways. Caelan laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You mean the days when we were hunted like animals? When mortals burned our houses, and we retaliated with massacres? Those traditional ways? I'm merely reporting. Get out of my sight. Matthias fled. Caelan stood very still, and Elara realized she was seeing something rare, an ancient vampire losing control. Not to rage, but to something worse, despair. 600 years, he said softly. 600 years building laws, teaching control, proving we could coexist with mortals without becoming monsters. And in one night, they tear it down. Then don't let them. He looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. You said once that strength and cruelty aren't the same thing. Elara continued, forcing her voice steady. Prove it. Don't surrender me. Don't give them what they want. Fight for the laws you built. If I fight, vampires will die. Maybe mortals too. If you don't fight, everything you've built dies anyway. She moved closer, ignoring her fear. I've spent my whole life running from bullies who thought weakness meant I wouldn't fight back. Don't make that same mistake. Through the bond, she felt something shift, his despair hardening into resolve. You're either very brave or very foolish, he said. Can't I be both? This time his smile was sharp, dangerous, and entirely vampire. Dorian, he called, and the vampire materialized from shadows. Change of plans. Take Elara to my private chambers. Triple wards on the door. If anyone tries to enter, anyone kill them. Your chambers? Dorian's eyebrows rose. My lord, that's the safest place in this castle. They're shielded by blood wards I set to centuries ago. No vampire can break them except me. He looked at Elara. You'll wait there until this is over. And if you lose, then die, knowing you saved an ancient vampire from his own self-pity. He touched her face, brief, cold, careful. Thank you, Elara, for reminding me why I built these laws in the first place. Then he was gone, moving toward the main hall where House Corvus waited. Dorian gripped Elara's arm. Time to go. Quickly now. As they ran through darkening corridors, Elara felt the bond stretch and pulse. Caelan's presence, blazing like cold fire, moving toward confrontation. She'd never felt anything like it, the terrible beauty of an ancient predator going to war. Behind them, she heard screams, crashes, the sound of vampires dying. House Valerian was under siege. And somewhere in the chaos, a 600-year-old vampire king was fighting to protect the laws that made him more than a monster. Elara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the bond burn. Don't die, she whispered. Please don't die. Through the bond, impossibly she thought she felt him hear her. Chapter 8. Blood and Ash. Caelan's chambers were nothing like Elara expected. She'd imagined Gothic opulence, coffins, velvet drapes, the theatrical trappings of vampire lords. Instead, she found simplicity. Stone walls lined with bookshelves, a desk covered in correspondence, a single chair by a cold fireplace. The only concession to immortality was the complete absence of mirrors and the heavy shutters bolted over the windows. He doesn't sleep here, Dorian said, sealing the door with words in a language that made Elara's ears ache. Blue light flared along the doorframe, the blood wards activating. He hasn't slept in a proper bed since, well, a very long time. Where does he sleep? In the catacombs. Stone coffin surrounded by the bones of his mortal family. Dorian's expression softened. He says it reminds him why he enforces the laws. Why he can't become the monster he's capable of being. Elara moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. Below, she could see the courtyard and the battle raging there. Vampires moved like liquid death, too fast for her eyes to properly follow. But she could see the results. Bodies falling, blood staining ancient stones, blue flames erupting where Caelan's magic struck. How many? She whispered. 20 Corvus vampires, maybe more. Plus the traitors from our own house. Dorian joined her at the window. But Caelan is fighting smart. He's driven them into the courtyard where his wards are strongest. Every spell they cast drains them. Every step on his ground weakens them. Through the bond, Elara felt flashes of Caelan's consciousness, cold fury, tactical precision, and beneath it all, a grief so old it had calcified into resolve. He was holding back, she realized. Fighting to incapacitate rather than kill, still trying to prove strength wasn't cruelty. There, Dorian pointed. The one in black armor. That's Damian Corvus. Elara saw him tall, pale, with eyes like burning coals. He moved through the battle with casual grace, not even bothering to fight, just watching, assessing. Why isn't he engaging? Because he's not here to win. He's here to prove a point. Dorian's voice turned grim. If Caelan slaughters his vampires, Damian will take that to the other houses. Say Valerian has become tyrannical. But if Caelan shows mercy, Damian will call it weakness. It's a trap. It's politics. Dorian turned from the window. And Caelan knows it. He's trying to. The bond exploded with pain. Elara gasped, doubling over. Through their connection, she felt it. Betrayal, a blade in the back, silver burning through ancient flesh. Not from Damian's forces. From inside House Valerian. No, Dorian breathed. Matthias. That traitorous. He was at the door before Elara could stop him, hands on the wards. I have to go. He needs. If you break the wards, I'm vulnerable. If I don't, our lord dies. Dorian's amber eyes were wild. Matthias stabbed him with a silver blade. Pure silver. It won't kill him, but it'll slow him long enough for Corvus to then go. Elara grabbed a letter opener from Caelan's desk. Inadequate, but better than nothing. I'll seal it behind you. Tell me how. You can't. You're mortal. Then I'll die trying. Go. Dorian hesitated one more heartbeat, then spoke rapid words in that ancient tongue. Repeat after me. Exactly. Elara memorized the syllables, harsh, angular, tasting of copper. As soon as Dorian left, she pressed her palm to the doorframe and spoke them. The wards flared blue, then red, then settled into a dim glow. Not as strong as before, but holding. Through the bond, she felt Caelan's shock at the silver blade, then his tactical mind adapting. Matthias had struck from behind coward's tactics, but Caelan was already moving, pulling the blade free even as it burned him. Elara sank against the door, riding the waves of his pain. It hurt, not like the pain was hers, but like watching someone she cared about suffer. The bond carried emotions, sensations, the echo of experience. She felt him kill Matthias. It happened fast, a snapped neck, clean and final. No hesitation, no mercy. Through the bond, she tasted Caelan's grief at the necessity, but also his cold acceptance. Matthias had chosen betrayal. The penalty was death. Then she felt something else. Damian Corvus moving, finally engaging. The two ancient vampires collided in the courtyard with a sound like thunder. Elara pressed her face to the window crack, watching as they fought too fast, too brutal, nothing like the theatrical duels in stories. This was savage efficiency, centuries of experience distilled into lethal motion. He's stronger, she whispered, feeling it through the bond. Caelan was older, more powerful, and he was winning. But Damian was smiling. It's still a trap, she realized. He wants Caelan to kill him. As if hearing her thought, Caelan stopped. Mid-strike, he froze, blade raised. Damian helpless beneath him, and didn't deliver the killing blow. Disappointing, Damian's voice carried across the courtyard. You really have gone soft, Valerian. I'm not giving you martyrdom. Caelan's voice was steady, despite the silver wound still bleeding. You came here to make me prove your point. I refuse. Then you've proven mine. Damian stood, brushing himself off. You value mortal approval over vampire strength. You've built a house of sheep. I've built a house that will outlast yours. Caelan gestured. And suddenly the remaining Corvus vampires were surrounded not by Valerian vampires, but by wards of blue light, trapped. You want traditional ways? Fine. By the old laws. You challenged and lost. Your vampires are mine until I choose to release them. Damian's expression flickered, the first sign of true emotion. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. Caelan's smile was sharp. They'll serve House Valerian for 1 year. They'll learn our laws, our consent protocols, our way of coexisting with mortals. And at the end, they can choose, stay here, return to Corvus with new perspective, or take final death. That's merciful. Yes. Also strategic. Caelan moved closer, and even through the window Elara could see the power radiating off him. Your vampires will see that strength doesn't require cruelty. And when they return home, if they return, they'll carry that knowledge. Your house will change, Damien. One way or another. Silence fell across the courtyard. Then, impossibly, Damien laughed. Clever, cruel in its own way, but clever. He bowed mockingly. Fine, take them. Corrupt them with your mortal sympathies. But this isn't over, Valerian. Other houses will hear of this night. Some will see wisdom. Others will see weakness worth exploiting. Let them come. Caelan's voice was granite. I've been fighting this war for 6 centuries. I can fight it for 6 more. Damien vanished into shadows, leaving his captured vampires behind. The battle was over. Elara sagged against the door, exhaustion crashing over her. Through the bond, she felt Caelan's triumph, not at victory, but at proving his point. He'd won without becoming the monster Damien wanted him to be. Footsteps approached. A knock, gentle, controlled. Elara, it's me. She opened the door to find Caelan standing there, covered in blood, some his, most not. The silver wound at his back still smoked faintly, but his eyes were clear, focused, alive in a way she'd never seen. You sealed the wards, he said softly. Dorian told me. That should have been impossible for a mortal. I had motivation. He studied her for a long moment. Then carefully, he reached out and touched her face, fingers cold but gentle. You felt it. Through the bond. My pain. Yes. I'm sorry. Don't be. She covered his hand with hers. You won. You proved that mercy isn't weakness. I proved I can be tactical while appearing merciful. His smile was sad. There's a difference. Is there? She met his silver blue gaze. You could have killed them all. Damien expected you to. But you chose something harder, something that might actually change things. Through the bond, she felt his surprise at her faith in him. As if he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone believe in his choices. The house is secure, he said finally. The traitors are dead. The Corvus vampires are imprisoned. And you? He paused. You need rest. The bond stress alone. I'm fine. You're not. I can feel your exhaustion. He guided her toward his chair. Sit. I'll have Vera bring food and medicine. The bond will settle in a few hours. As he turned to leave, Elara caught his wrist. Thank you. For not surrendering me. For fighting for your laws. Thank you, he replied quietly. For reminding me they were worth fighting for. He left. And Elara sat in the ancient vampire's chair, surrounded by his books and correspondence, feeling the bond pulse with new understanding. Something had changed tonight. Not just the battle, but between them. The question was, what came next? Chapter 9. The quiet afterth. Next 3 weeks passed in strange, fragile peace. House Valerian rebuilt. Broken windows were replaced. Blood-stained stones were scrubbed clean. The captured Corvus vampires were housed in the West Tower, guarded and taught the consent laws they'd come to mock. Some resisted. Others, surprisingly, listened. Elara returned to her library. Work. But everything felt different now. The bond had settled into something constant, a low hum of awareness connecting her to Caelan. She knew when he woke at dusk, felt when he held court, sensed the weight of leadership pressing on him, and he felt her too. She'd discovered that the first time she'd cut herself on a broken book spine, he'd appeared in the library within minutes, checking the wound with an intensity that made her breathless. It's just a paper cut, she'd protested. I felt your pain through the bond. His jaw had been tight. I thought he hadn't finished. Didn't need to. They both knew what he'd thought. Another attack, more danger. The mortal he'd bound himself to, bleeding out while he was too far away to help. The bond was supposed to be temporary, fading after the feeding stopped. But Elara hadn't missed any scheduled feedings. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, she offered her wrist. And every time, the bond grew stronger. She told herself it was practical, strategic. The bond helped Caelan protect her. She didn't examine why she no longer wanted it to fade. Tonight, she sat in the library's highest alcove, her favorite spot, surrounded by windows overlooking the valley. The moon was full, casting silver light across pages of a manuscript she was cataloging. Old French, beautifully illuminated, detailing the founding of House Valerian 6 centuries ago. You're reading my history. She didn't startle anymore when Caelan appeared. The bond gave her warning, a cold pressure in her chest that meant he was near. I'm cataloging it, she corrected, not looking up. There's a difference. Not much of one. You've been reading everything about my house's founding. He moved into the alcove, and she felt the temperature drop. Looking for something? Answers. She finally met his gaze. You were turned young, mid-20s maybe. The manuscript mentions a great tragedy that led to House Valerian's creation, but it's vague. I wanted to know what happened. His expression closed. That's personal. So is tasting someone's blood and memories. She set the manuscript aside. You saw my trauma with Marcus. I saw yours, glimpses of wheat fields and a woman's scream. Fair is fair. For a moment she thought he'd leave. Then, slowly, he sat on the windowsill, ancient vampire perched like a Gothic sculpture, moonlight making him look carved from marble. Her name was Isabel, he said quietly. She was everything. My betrothed. We'd known each other since childhood, planned to marry after harvest. His voice went distant. The lord who controlled our lands was a vampire. We didn't know. He kept humans like livestock, feeding carefully enough that no one noticed the deaths. Elara's breath caught. Isabel discovered the truth. She was clever, observant, she noticed patterns others missed. She confronted him. Caelan's hands clenched. He killed her, slowly, made me watch, then offered me a choice. Die with her, or become like him, and live forever with the memory. You chose immortality. I chose revenge. His silver blue eyes met hers, and she saw the ancient grief there. I let him turn me, learned everything he knew. Then, when I was strong enough, I destroyed him, slowly, the way he'd destroyed her. And then I had eternity and nothing to fill it with. I was a monster who'd killed a monster. I fed without consent, hunted without mercy. For decades, I was exactly what vampires are supposed to be. He looked away, until I met someone who showed me a different path. Another ancient who'd built laws, structure, ways of coexisting with mortals without becoming predators. The one who showed you mercy when you were running. He nodded. Her name was Serafini. She taught me that immortality without ethics is just extended monstrosity, that we could be more than our hunger. His voice softened. She's gone now. True death, to centuries ago. But I carry her teachings. They became House Valerian's foundation. Elara moved to sit beside him on the windowsill, careful to maintain space. That's why you enforce consent laws. Why? You remember what it's like to be powerless. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. And that's why Damien's attack cut so deep. Matthias betrayed me, yes. But Isolde and the others, vampires I'd trained, who'd sworn to uphold these laws, they chose violence over progress. It made me question whether anything I've built matters. It matters to Vera, to the other humans serving here by choice instead of compulsion, and to you. The question hung between them. Elara considered it carefully, this vampire lord who'd shown her his trauma, who'd tasted hers, who'd fought an entire house to protect laws that made him more than a monster. Yes, she said simply. It matters to me. Through the bond, she felt his surprise, then something warmer, gratitude, or perhaps hope. The second feeding is tomorrow, he said, changing the subject but not really. Are you still willing? Of course. Why wouldn't I be? Because the bond will deepen. After tomorrow, you'll feel more of me. My hunger, my moods, my complications. He met her eyes. I want to make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. Elara's heart beat faster. What if I want the bond deeper? Silence. Caelan stared at her like she'd said something incomprehensible. Elara, you feel safer when you can sense me. I feel safer knowing you'll come if I'm in danger. She kept her voice steady. The bond isn't a burden. It's practical. Practical. His laugh was soft, almost bitter. You're rationalizing intimacy as strategy, aren't you? No, the word came out rough. I'm trying very hard not to want this more than I should. You're mortal, young, deserving of a life that doesn't involve binding yourself to a 600-year-old vampire. But every time I taste your blood, every time I feel you through the bond, he stopped. I'm being selfish. What if I'm being selfish too? He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the loneliness in him, the centuries of isolation broken only by duty and law. He'd built House Valerian to be more than monsters, but he'd never allowed himself to be more than the Lord enforcing those laws. Tomorrow, she said quietly. Second feeding. Library. Like last time. And Caelan? She waited until he met her gaze. Stop punishing yourself for wanting connection. Even vampires deserve not to be alone. She left him there, moonlight and shadow, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. As she walked back to her chambers, the bond pulsed warm now, almost tender. She felt his confusion, his longing, his careful hope, and beneath it all, she felt something she hadn't expected, the beginning of her own transformation. Not into a vampire, nothing so dramatic, but into someone who saw the monster and chose to stay anyway, someone who was falling for an ancient vampire lord and didn't quite know what to do about it. Tomorrow's feeding would change things. She could feel it. The question was whether either of them was ready for what came next. Chapter 10. The choice between worlds. The second feeding began like the first library. Candlelight, Dorian as witness, but everything else was different. Caelan stood by the window, tension radiating through the bond. He'd been quiet all evening, and Elara had felt his internal struggle, desire warring with duty, longing fighting against the belief that he was being selfish. We can postpone, he said without turning. If you've changed your mind. I haven't. Elara moved to the center of the room, where Dorian had prepared the medical supplies. Unless you have? No, the word came out strained. But after tonight, the bond will be significant. You'll feel my hunger constantly. Know when I'm hunting, feeding from others. Experience the darkness that comes with immortality, and you'll feel my mortality. My heartbeat counting down, my warmth that will eventually fade. She extended her wrist. We're both taking risks. He finally turned, silver blue eyes searching her face. Why? Why deepen this bond when you could petition to leave? Start fresh somewhere safe. Because I don't want safe anymore, she thought. Because you make me feel alive in ways Marcus's terror never did. Because I've seen your humanity, and it's beautiful. But she said only, because I choose to. Something broke in his expression, walls dropping, ancient loneliness surfacing. He crossed to her in 3 strides, taking her wrist with shaking hands. This changes everything, he whispered. I know. He pressed his mouth to her wrist and the world exploded. The first feeding had been intense. This was transcendent. She saw his memories flood through, not just glimpses, but immersion. She felt the weight of 600 years, the countless nights of loneliness, the burden of leadership without companionship. She tasted his hunger, not for blood, but for connection, for someone who saw the monster and stayed anyway, and he saw hers. The years with Marcus, yes, but also the strength she'd built from trauma. The way she'd found purpose in his library, safety in his laws, home in his ancient castle. The growing feelings she hadn't wanted to name. The bond snapped into place, not the tenuous thread from before, but a cable of steel and starlight. When Caelan withdrew, they were both shaking. I felt, he started. Everything. Elara's voice was unsteady. I felt everything. You are. Dorian cleared his throat. The bond is unprecedented. I've never seen one this strong, not even in the old days. He wrapped her wrist efficiently, but his amber eyes were troubled. My lord, this is beyond twice monthly feeding protocols. This is, I know what this is, Caelan said roughly. He turned to Elara. We need to talk. Alone. After Dorian left, silence stretched between them. Through the bond, Elara felt Caelan's turmoil, desire, fear, hope, guilt all tangled together. I've lived 600 years, he said finally. I've had companions, donors, even lovers. But I've never bonded like this. Not since. He stopped. This isn't supposed to happen with twice monthly feedings. This is the kind of bond that forms between vampire mates. Permanent, unbreakable, except by death. Elara's heart hammered. Are you saying where I'm saying we're becoming something I didn't intend? Something that will complicate everything. He moved to the window, putting distance between them. You're mortal, Elara. You have perhaps 60 years left. I'll live for millennia. When you die, I'll feel it through this bond. Experience your death as if it's my own. Then turn me. The words escaped before she could stop them. Caelan spun, eyes wide. You don't know what you're asking, don't I? She stood, moving closer. I've tasted your memories. I know what immortality costs. The loneliness, the weight of years, watching everyone you care about die. But I also know what you've built here, laws that matter. Vampires learning to be more than monsters, humans serving by choice. She met his gaze. I want to be part of that. Not as a temporary mortal, but as something permanent. Elara, you told me once that you chose immortality for revenge. Let me choose it for something better, for purpose. For she stopped, gathering courage. For you. Through the bond, she felt his shock, his desperate longing, his terror at wanting this too much. If I turn you, he said slowly, there's no going back. You'll lose the sun forever. Lose the life you could have had: marriage, children, growing old with someone mortal. I lost that life the moment I ran through your gates. She took his cold hands in her warm ones. Marcus destroyed my old world. You gave me a new one. Let me choose to stay in it. The transformation is agony. 3 nights of dying while venom rewrites your humanity. I've survived worse. You haven't. His voice cracked. You've survived trauma, yes, but you haven't experienced your own death. Most humans break during the transformation. They wake as mindless things, all hunger and no control. I'd have to execute you. She flinched, but held his gaze. Then teach me, like Serafini taught you. Show me how to wake as something more than a monster. Silence. Caelan stared at her, and through the bond she felt his walls crumbling, centuries of careful isolation breaking against her determination. If we do this, he whispered, it's forever. You'll be bound to me through eternity. No escape, no freedom. Just us. She stepped closer until they were breathing the same air. Just us. Building something that matters. Isn't that enough? For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, carefully, he cupped her face, cold hands against warm skin. I've been alone for so long, he admitted. I'd forgotten what it feels like to want someone to stay. Then let me stay. He kissed her soft, careful, cold lips against warm. The bond blazed between them, and Elara felt his surrender, his hope, his terrified joy. When he pulled back, his eyes had shifted to that ancient silver. 3 nights from now, I'll begin the transformation. But understand, this is your choice. You're forever. I won't trap you in immortality. You're not trapping me. I'm choosing you. Through the bond, she felt his wonder at those words. They stood together in the library, mortal and vampire. Warmth and cold, temporary and eternal, as the moon rose over Blackthorn Keep. 3 nights. Then Elara would die and wake as something new. Something that could stand beside a 600-year-old vampire lord and help him build a world where monsters learn to be more. It was a choice between worlds. The mortal life she'd lost and the immortal one she was claiming. She chose immortality. She chose purpose. She chose him. And as Caelan held her in the candlelit library, the bond singing between them, Elara realized she'd finally found what she'd been running toward all along. Not safety. Not escape. Home. Epilogue. 6 months later, Elara woke at dusk to the now familiar hunger. She'd survived the transformation, 3 nights of agony as venom rewrote her humanity into something cold and eternal. Caelan had stayed with her through every moment, anchoring her to sanity when the pain tried to break her mind. She'd woken as herself. Changed, yes. Stronger, faster, seeing the world through vampire senses. But still Elara. Now she stood in the library, her library, adding new books to shelves she'd organized. Through the bond, she felt Caelan approaching before she saw him. Still cataloging? His voice held amusement. Eternity is long. I need projects. She turned, and even after 6 months, his beauty still stole her breath. Besides, someone has to maintain order in this chaos you call a collection. He pulled her close, and she marveled at how perfectly they fit now, cold against cold. Immortal matched with immortal. House Corvus has requested a formal treaty, he murmured against her hair. They want to adopt our consent laws. Damien himself is proposing changes. Because of the vampires you kept? Because you were right. Showing them a different way worked better than violence ever could. Elara smiled. 600 years of loneliness, and she'd helped him see that mercy could be strategic. Outside, night birds called. Inside, the library breathed with ancient knowledge. Ready for tonight's court? He asked, always, hand in cold hand. They walked through Blackthorn Keep, vampire lord and his newly turned mate, building a world where monsters could choose to be more. Behind them, the library waited, full of stories about humans and vampires. Now they were writing their own. The end.